All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today for the UC Young Professionals webinar, First Time Home Buying 101 from Preparation to Closing. My name is Maurice Stewart, and I serve as the Director of Alumni Engagement for the University of Cincinnati Alumni Association. We are absolutely thrilled to have so many Bearcats tuned in from all across the country for this great conversation. Whether you're looking to buy a home next month, next year, or are just starting to think about the possibility, taking that first step towards home ownership can feel a bit overwhelming. There are financial considerations, mortgage options, house hunting dynamics, and complex closing steps to navigate. That is exactly why we brought together this fantastic panel of industry experts who are also happen to be proud UC alumni. They're here today to pull back the curtain on the entire process, share practical strategies, and answer your questions so that you can make your next big move with absolute confidence. And before we introduce our guests and dive into the discussion, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping items to share. First, we want to make sure this session is as valuable as possible for you. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature at any point during the webinar to drop in your questions. We will dedicate time to answering as many of those as we can later in the hour. Second, do not worry about scrambling to write everything down. Today's session is being recorded, and we will follow up with an email containing the video along with key resources shared during the presentation. Now, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panelists for this afternoon. First, our moderator for today's discussion is Benoit. Anne is a CPA and licensed realtor with Sibsey Klein Realtors, providing buyers and sellers with expert guidance and deep local market insight. She is also a professor emeritus of accounting at UC Clermont and holds a bachelor's in accounting from the College of Arts and Sciences, along with an MBA in accounting from the Lindner College of Business. Joining her on the panel today, we have three outstanding alumni experts. We got Jacob Hoevenaar. Jacob is a licensed realtor with Keller Williams Advisors Realty. He specializes in helping clients navigate the complexities of purchasing a home through honest communication, thorough market education, and strategic advice. Jacob earned his associates in business management technology and bachelor's in applied administration from UC Blue Ash. Next, we got Brent Hoffman. Brent is a branch manager with Paramount Residential Mortgage Group with 12 years of experience in the mortgage industry. He helps buyers secure the best loan options through careful evaluation of their budgets and financial goals. Brent earned his bachelor's of business administration and marketing from the Lindner College of Business. And finally, we have Julie Rose. Julie applies a decade of strategic marketing experience to every transaction as a sales associate with Coldwell Banker Realty, helping buyers identify their specific needs and find the perfect home. Julie earned her bachelor's in communication from the College of Arts and Sciences. Thank you all so much for sharing your time and expertise with the Bearcat community. So with that, I'll turn the virtual floor over to Anne to get the conversation started.
Good afternoon. My name is Anne Benoit. I am a UC graduate and a loyal Bearcat. I have a bachelor's and an MBA from UC. I spent my career as a professor of accounting at UC. I started the real estate training program at UC Clermont, and in doing so, I became very interested in real estate. So I decided to get my real estate license. I actually taught the real estate finance class. Then, after retiring from teaching at UC, I became a real estate agent for Sibsey Klein in the Milford, Miami Township office. I'm also a professor emerita at UC. I found that my accounting background is very useful in real estate. I understand financing and can help my clients to determine what their appropriate price range should be, along with the help of our finance officers. I find it useful in preparing estimates of their expenses and net proceeds and in looking at comparable sales. Today, I'll be serving as the moderator for our webinar. And as we go through the discussion, keep in mind that we are in the Midwest and conditions might be somewhat different if you are in another part of the country. However, many of the principles will be universal. Now, I would like to ask each of our panelists to give us a brief story about their connection to UC. Julie?
Hi guys, I'm Julie Rose and I'm with Coldwell Banker. I have been a realtor for just a little over 10 years now, and I'm based over on the west side of Cincinnati out of our Rybold office. And I graduated from the University of Cincinnati in 2006. I'm a proud Kappa Kappa Gamma alum as well as Bearcat alum. Um, I graduated with my communications degree from Arts and Sciences with a focus in public speaking and public relations. And then I spent about 10 years in the marketing and advertising space at a couple big agencies around town and found that I was just searching for more. So I decided to go get my real estate license. And I now help families and individuals make the biggest financial decision of their life of buying a house and really enjoy it. So thanks for having me on today, guys.
Thank you, Julie. Brent, you want to give us a quick idea of your connection to UC?
Sure. I graduated from UC in 2011. It's been 15 years. That's crazy. And once I graduated from UC, I had a degree in marketing. And as soon as I graduated, I got a job in sales, selling home loans. So I've been a licensed loan officer. It's actually been 15 years now. The first few years in the business, it was exclusively cold calling, refinance only. But since 2013, I've had my own mortgage office where it's been almost exclusively purchase loans. So I've been helping with home financing for a long time now.
All right. And then Jacob, tell us a little bit about your connection.
Yeah, I went to UC Blue Ash, so a little bit of a different experience, but I graduated from there in 2020 and got my associates in 2018. I did like a 2+2 sort of situation. And then after that, I had some connections with a local real estate team and just joined the team and ended up after about a year going out on my own. So.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, let's get started. Part 1, the preparation and the search. And we're going to be talking about everything from the initial financial planning to walking through the front door of a potential home. Brent, let's start with you. Many first-time buyers start buying homes online. Why is it critical to speak with a lender before that first digital search? And what is the reality of down payments for first-time homebuyers today?
The main reason that I would talk to someone like myself first is obviously you don't really know what your budget is. You don't know what price house is going to cost you what. You don't know what your monthly payment's going to be or what your down payment required would be. So it's almost like shopping for a car. Maybe you shouldn't go to the Ferrari dealer if you're not ready to buy the Ferrari yet. So let's figure out what kind of house you can buy and stay within your budget. More specifically, when I help to pre-approve someone, I'll figure out what kind of money they have to work with, what kind of loans they can get, and what do you want to pay monthly? Because maybe you only want to pay $1,500, but I can approve you for $2,000. Let's talk about what $1,500 a month would get you, not always just talk about you could have $2,000. Let's try to stay within where your budget is when we start our search. So it's just to be prepared and be ready because there's a lot that goes into buying a house. So before you start shopping, let's just make sure we're prepared and we know what we're getting into on the financial side.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Julie, when looking at a new city or a different part of the country, how do you help a buyer identify the right location and distinguish between their non-negotiable needs and their nice-to-have wants?
Oh, great question. Of course. We have what are called buyer consultations. And so that buyer consultation, we sit down and we talk about really a lot about their lifestyle. So I think it's hard to just say how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. You want to kind of have a conversation around like what does your day to day look like, maybe like where you're working, what kind of things do you like to do, where's your family, so where's your core, and then from there we start spreading our search and working with our lender partners to make sure that we stay in budget. Luckily we have a lot of great online tools, but it's super important to remember that, you know, a paint color can change. Carpeting can change quite easily, but nice to haves might be a white kitchen or a fenced yard, but those can be added in later, whereas the location specifically are, those are must-haves. Those are really important, and just overall safety. So when
Very,
people can determine, their wants versus their needs, and we can have that conversation together, it makes for a much more successful experience for everybody.
very good. Thank you. Jacob, when walking through a house, it is easy to get distracted by aesthetic updates. What are the universal structural or mechanical red flags that a buyer should look for in any climate?
Yeah, so obviously, it is easy to get distracted by upgrades and things like especially kitchens or big fancy bathrooms, stuff like that. But when you're walking, you're going to want to walk around the outside of the house first and pay attention to if it looks like there's any like grading issues, things like that. You're going to want to look at, the foundation closely. What type of foundation is it? Does it have any cracking? And if it does have cracking, how big are they? Are they horizontal or vertical? Because those can be, different outcomes based on those. Some are repairable and some cost a whole lot more. So you want to look at things like windows. Do they have condensation? Do you notice any weird cracks in drywall? Any spots on ceilings or walls that look like they've been patched or painted? And not necessarily all that is like a deal breaker, but it's stuff that you might want to have follow-up questions about. Any obviously unpleasant smells. You want to pay attention to if there's corrosion if you can get underneath the house, in a basement or a crawl space area. You want to see if there's any kind of corrosion on pipes or, what kind of materials they used in the construction as well. Like, is it PEX, like plastic water pipes, or is it like a copper piping? But yeah, see if those are corroded, anything like that. Pay close attention to outlets. There are electrical codes that Cincinnati has some older homes, so some houses have not been brought up to code, and that can be expensive sometimes as well. So, if the outlets aren't 3 prongs, or, that means they lack a ground, or if you're in a bathroom or something and there's some, it doesn't have the little GCFI outlets with the tester button and stuff like that. So it could need, updating with the electrical system, especially you see in some older houses here, they have the knob and tube wiring is another big thing. So there's a lot to pay attention to, but the big things would be like your electrical systems, if they look up to date. So open up the panel, always look at the panel, always look at pay close attention to the foundation for any cracks or anything like that, or what they would call like efflorescence, which would be that white. If you've ever seen white chalky stuff on the outside of your house, you're really looking for water damage is a huge one that is not always necessarily obvious. And then you're looking at, just the systems and the building materials and stuff like that. So.
And just to join like you on that conversation, I think like your realtor partner and your inspector partner and your lender partner all work like really closely together. So depending on like what your loan type is, so if it's like a conventional or a VA or a FHA, which I know we'll talk about later, like your realtor partner is going to look out for you in those sorts of areas too, because we're going to know what sometimes gets flagged, like in those inspections during those appraisals and things like that.
Yeah. How often
Yeah.
do you hear GFCI, those outlets in the bathrooms and so forth?
Yeah, a lot
Right.
on kitchen countertops and bathrooms and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. And the roof, people usually need to look at the roof as well.
Yeah, that was another thing
Yeah.
I had written was you can tell, you usually want to look at the roof ventilation. If it has soffit vents, if it has box or ridge vents, you can usually tell the age of the roof by the construction, the shingles and stuff like that. So.
Very good. Good points. All right. This one's for Brent. For those managing student loans or other debt, how do you help them determine a comfortable monthly payment that won't leave them house poor?
Sure. So one of the things we'll talk about when I'm pre-approving someone is their desired budget. In regards to student loans, they're really not that much of a hindrance in getting qualified to buy a house. There are some loan programs where you can go on an income-based repayment, and whatever that payment is, I use that to qualify you. There are other loans, FHA loans, where we can choose a standard 0.5% of the loan balance as the monthly payment. So, I mean, I've helped people this year that have had over $500,000 of student loan debt that bought a house. So it isn't something that really has to hold you back. It just depends on your situation. And sometimes you're not in that income-based repayment. And when we're pre-approving you, we can talk about that. If you go into a plan like this, it can set us up so we're prepared when it does come time to actually pull the trigger and buy. Maybe you're not approved for as much as you'd like in your current setup, but if we manipulate a few things, you could be approved for more.
Very good. Thank you, Brent. Okay, Julie, how can out-of-town buyers effectively research neighborhood trends and growth patterns if they aren't physically there to walk the streets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So online, we have a lot of great tools. I direct my clients a lot to a website called spotcrime.com, especially for my out-of-town buyers. So that website specifically is fed by our police and fire stations. And so you can type in any address that you want, and you can see what kind of activity is going on in that neighborhood. In the time of COVID, I also spent a lot of time FaceTiming clients with my phone and taking them on virtual tours so that we could check out areas. I would visit those communities in evenings, mornings, afternoons, so that they could kind of get a visual on what the community and what kind of activity was going on there. And I think that was really effective as well. When it comes to market trends or like community trends, seeing how things are improving and growing in different neighborhoods, it's always going to just you're going to lean on your real estate professional or your partner. So you're going to reach out to them. I have access to a lot of data so that I can see how neighborhoods are projected to grow. I can also see, just being involved in the different communities, I can see new companies that are coming into the area, so that, those might lead to additional jobs in the area and more new construction and things like that.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Jacob, in a competitive market, how do you determine if a house is priced fairly or if it is being strategically underpriced to spark a bidding war?
Yeah, so really you're going to want to work closely with your real estate agent on this one. The big way is just going to be to check comparables to see what other homes in that neighborhood have sold for. But some other indications are if it's a new home to the market, if it's only been on the market for a day or two, and your agent reaches out to the listing agent and they have a lot of interest or quite a few offers on that house. And if you kind of if you've seen a few houses, if it's your first house, it can be the first house you see, it can be hard to tell. But if you've seen quite a few and you've been shopping for a while and it almost seems too good to be true, it could be an indication that it's probably strategically underpriced. But the big ways are going to be, how long has it been on the market? What have other things in that neighborhood sold for? And then, just how many offers are coming in within those first 2 or 3 days. If they've got quite a few and it's a multiple offer situation, it might be something that you then reach out to someone like Brent, your lender, and kind of see where your parameters would be and what your limitations are. And then, if it seems like it's getting out of hand, it might be strategically underpriced. But another thing to keep in mind in situations like that is, if it is being bid up higher and higher, you're going to want to make sure that your agent does look at comps, because you could run into problems later with like an appraisal or something like that. And, the seller might then look at you and say, if you were prepared to pay this much, they want you to cover that gap between your appraisal and your, loan amount. So
Good point.
Hey, Jake. I'm sorry. I want to jump in here real quick. Jake, question.
Yeah,
The word comps. I know many of us know what that is, but can you explain what a comp is for someone that's
yeah,
just diving into this?
yeah. Sorry, a comp would just be like it's short for comparable. So a house that's similar features, similar size, similar. So same amount of bedrooms, same amount of bathrooms, typically similar square footage, and then a similar location or neighborhood.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If we do have any terms that you don't understand, we'll explain them if need be, certainly.
Sorry about that.
Okay, then we can move on to part two, which is the win, which includes the offer and negotiations. And let's say that the buyer has found the house they want. This is the most intense part of the process. So, Jacob, aside from just offering more money, what are some creative ways to make an offer stand out to a seller in today's environment?
Yeah, so obviously more money is the easy answer, but there are things like the type of loan you're getting. If there are more contingencies or things associated with your financing, that could be something that would sway. Like an FHA loan might have like certain requirements with the appraisal and stuff like that that would cause a seller to have to make some minor repairs. So sometimes that can make a difference. Typically, it's not a huge deal, but you can also make your offer just appear stronger by giving like more money in a deposit, which you would get back at closing. So you could have a stronger deposit. You could um, just being prepared and being intentional when you make your offer. So not being super wishy-washy or anything like that. Cash is obviously, if you're not getting a loan at all, that can be helpful and can be enticing to a seller. But really, it's going to be about limiting what they would call like your contingencies. So you have contingencies like if you have to sell a home that you already own, or your inspection contingency, your appraisal contingency. Um, Sometimes you can limit those things. So like you can elect to inspect certain elements or set a dollar amount that, well, we're only going to ask for repairs if they're over a certain amount, stuff like that. So, and I'm sure you're going to get into the risks associated with waiving some of those contingencies, but sometimes those are ways outside of making your offer, the sale price higher, that you could, make your offer a little bit more enticing. The other thing would just be to remain pretty flexible. Sometimes sellers select an offer based on how long they need the property. So if you can wait 45 to 60 days or something like that, and another offer comes in and they need the home in 30 days, sometimes the seller will pick the offer that allows them to stay in their home for an extra couple weeks, especially if they're closing on a house or something like that and they need a little bit more flexibility. So if you have the flexibility can help as well.
Very good. Anyone else on that topic?
Yeah,
Any
and
other
there's a lot of
creative?
ways on the financing side of things, like Jake was saying, especially if you own a current home, ways to remove contingencies. But as a lender, I ran into this exact situation on a house I was buying. That I made offers on houses and they weren't accepted, and it made me mad. I do this, like how am I in this position? So as a lender, one of the things that we started doing was two different things. There are a few programs that you can pay for where essentially you are a cash back offer as well, where it's like I'm getting a loan, but however, I would buy your house in cash if my loan didn't perform in time. So that's something that I offer at my company. What I also will do is I'll underwrite your file ahead of time. So sometimes you'll get like a pre-qualification where you like talk to Rocket Mortgage online for 20 minutes, but they didn't get any of your documents. What I'll actually do is completely underwrite your file. So you're going to do your actual application with me, and I'll get your pay stubs and your W-2s and your bank statements, turn it in like we're actually buying a house, and clear all of your conditions. That way, your pre-approval, I can explain to the sellers that, listen, they're completely underwritten. I don't need pay stubs. I don't need a bank statement. I don't have to do anything. We'll actually offer a $10,000 guarantee that says if they don't get their loan because I messed up reviewing their bank statements or their income or their credit report, I would give the sellers $10,000. I'm not going to waste your time because I've already spent time paying processors and underwriters to get them this far along in the process. So that's how someone that's working with me for their financing, their offer can look that much better than everyone else because I'm going to call the listing agent when you submit an offer and explain all those things that you already did as a buyer. So there's things that you can do even on the financing side that doesn't necessarily impact like your direct offer itself, like the numbers in the contract. So.
Julie, any thoughts on this? Making the offer more creative.
Yeah, I mean, I would add, obviously, the relationships matter a lot. And also, all these contingencies are there for a reason. You know, I mean, these are all protections for you guys going into this process. I think all the points that have been made, like we've done, I had a buyer for a period of time who just had really favorite numbers. And so in the offer, we put her favorite numbers for her close dates and things like that. And it was strategic, but it was also impactful to her so that she felt that much stronger going into her offer. But I think you just have to be educated, you know, and so that's why all of us as partners would help you weigh the pros and cons of making these decisions so that you understand the ramifications of what you're going into, because ultimately you'll probably only buy, you know, 3 or 4 houses in your life, maybe more for some of you. So it's really important that you know, choose some people that you feel like you can trust.
Thank you. There's a term that you may hear as you're going through making offers, and that is earnest money. And that is the deposit-like money that you put down with your offer, and then it is applied to your closing costs as well. So the term earnest money is something you'll probably hear in this buying process. Okay, Julie, what is the risk of waiving things like inspections or appraisals, and how do you advise clients on making that choice safely?
Yeah, I think that goes back to our education piece. So understanding the pros and cons. During my buyer consultation, we go through kind of like the flow chart of the entire process of buying and selling a house. And there are, as we've discussed, different contingencies all the way through the contract intentionally placed there to protect our buyers. And going through each of those areas, you can get a clear understanding of where you are in the process and what your options are at different points. So, as Anne mentioned, earnest money is part of the contingency. So you putting in that amount of money, knowing that you're going to get that back at closing. And then when we get into inspections, you know, we always remind our clients that these are things that are like deal breakers. These aren't things like, oh, I just really feel like this hardwood floor needs to be refinished. Like that's not a reason to, you know, move away from a property. You saw that when you walked in the house and you placed the initial offer. So that's really important for people to understand on the front end. And then when we get into the appraisal portion, our buyers just have to understand that if we go in with a really strong offer that's say $5,000-$10,000 over, and our loan partner shares with us that that appraisal came in low, that's an independent third party. That's who manages that appraisal, and they're protecting the bank. They're not necessarily protecting us as the buyer. If that appraisal comes in low, we have to have that discussion with you as the buyer, and then also with the loan officer and the seller of who's going to cover that difference. So are we going to have enough money as a buyer to come to the table with more money for closing? Or can our seller negotiate with us a little bit? Can they take a little bit less? So you understanding that is really important, because we might be back to the drawing board after you've invested money in the earnest money in the inspection, and then another $500 in the appraisal. So education, Again, communication, just knowing there are no dumb questions when it comes to buying a house. It is not something you're going to do often, and it is okay to ask, and you should feel really comfortable asking those questions. So education, I think, is biggest point for me.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Julie.
All right.
Really quickly. Sorry, Ann. I want to jump in
Yes,
here really
go
quickly.
right ahead if you have something else.
Yeah, and Julie, and for the other panelists as well, question around the FHA loan and how that affects the appraisal, and then what makes the FHA loan more challenging, if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, I can touch on this. So FHA, and there are other similar loans, a VA loan and a USDA loan operate in a similar manner. If you just think a conventional loan is another loan type, conventional is what everyone thinks is a 20% down payment. I don't even have to have the utilities on for that kind of a purchase. So the appraiser is not going to go in the house and check nearly as much that they would on an FHA appraisal. So specifically for FHA, there's a lot of common things that come up. The most common things are actually not all that expensive to fix, but it's things like chipping paint. Even on like an outside shed would need to be scraped and painted. Outlets, the GFCI outlets in kitchens, bathrooms, anywhere with water, you need to replace the outlets. Now the outlets are $20 or $25. It's not a lot of money potentially to change. Anything with handrails or railings, so like a safety concern, you'd need to put handrails up in a lot of different areas. Those are the most common things, but FHA isn't actually all that picky. I've closed FHA loans with the knob and tube electrical that we've talked about, as long as I can confirm that it's not completely abnormal for the area and it's not a safety concern. But those are some of the bigger items. There's also some things like a conventional loan, they won't even look in the crawl space, where an FHA loan, they'll need to get access to the crawl space. So it's a little bit pickier, but I think the biggest misconception is that an FHA loan is not as good and the borrower is not as well qualified. And that's not always the case. Sometimes FHA will offer a much lower interest rate. And if your credit is just not perfect, the loan can be far superior. So there are ways where if you are an FHA buyer, you submit an offer that says, listen, if it fails for these basic FHA things, I'll spend the $500 it takes to fix it. So sometimes, even if you're not that conventional borrower in your FHA, you can find ways to make your offer strong and still get your offer accepted, even if it's not the most preferred financing type.
One thought comes to mind. What is the usual down payment on FHA?
So FHA loans are standard with 3.5% down as the minimum down payment. In the state of Ohio and many other states, there are down payment assistance grants where I'll do FHA loans and you don't even have a down payment. I actually have down payment assistance. I'm licensed in every state but New York. So I've helped people to buy homes in Colorado, in Utah with 0% down payment assistance grants, where that 3.5% is given by a government entity. But the other loans are comparable. USDA and VA are 0% down if you qualify for those. And conventional loans are as little as 3% down for a first-time home buyer as well. So it's not that FHA is the only loan you can get with a low down payment, it's just the most flexible. But even people that have very low credit scores, I've helped people with credit scores of 520 this year to buy a house. If your credit is below a certain threshold, instead of 3.5%, it's a mandatory 10%. So if you've got a lot of money to put down, I can overcome a lot of challenged credit issues. But the short answer is an FHA loan, 3.5% down is what the standard number is that they want. But there's workarounds to get away with less.
I would just build a little.
Out.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann.
No, you go.
I would just build on Brent a little bit and say, like, I think coming out of college, a lot of us just didn't have credit. So I think getting involved with Brent or a lender partner sooner is better, because they can evaluate where you are. And even if I had no money graduating from college, I was poor as could be, but I had the know-how, I had a job, I was ready to do something. And so getting with somebody like Brent, he can tell you, hey, start up a really small credit card and just maybe make that payment every single month or something like that. And maybe you're running into that still, Brent, and maybe you're not. Maybe kids have a lot more money now. I just don't even know about it.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that because there are so many different types of loan and it isn't always a huge amount for a down payment, that you really need to work with a loan officer and of course your agent to look at all the possibilities that a home can be within your reach. And like you say, with the credit scores and all that. All right, very good. Thank you. Um, Brent, once an offer is accepted, what is the very first thing the buyer needs to do to ensure that the financing stays on track?
So the short answer with me is I'm already going to have you prepared where nothing changes. When you're under contract, you don't really do anything different. But obviously, you don't want to change anything during the process. You don't want to change your employment. You don't want to be depositing money. You don't want to open new debt. You don't want to basically change anything in your situation that was different from when we pre-approved you. But especially when we underwrite some of these files before they even get started, there are times when you go under contract and you and I don't necessarily work on anything together because it's all already done. You're doing your inspections and ordering the appraisal, and we're kind of just waiting for the closing date sometimes just because we do a lot of that work in the front. But the short answer would be don't change your situation, don't change your income, don't change your debts.
What about getting married, Brent? Do you recommend people getting married after they go under contract?
So I have a funny story about that. The short answer would be
I'd love to hear
I
it.
wouldn't mess with that. But there are some loan programs like a VA loan where if you try to buy a house on a VA loan and you add your girlfriend, you can't, or you have to put down a down payment. So I've had people go get married so they can add their girlfriend. It's now their wife, and then they can qualify and add them on the loan and do 0% down on VA. So ironically, typically I wouldn't mess around with that, but sometimes people do because it can change what you can get approved to buy.
Right.
That's an interesting situation to
But
decide.
it's
And I would
also a
just,
good point because Ohio is
yeah.
not a community property state, which means in Ohio, if there's a husband and a wife and the one spouse has really low credit, I can give a loan to the other person and I don't count the lower credit scores debts. There are some states like Texas that if you got married, even if your spouse is not going to go on the loan, I have to pull their credit and count their debts into your debt ratio. So working in a lot of different states can make it a little bit more complicated. Another good reason to talk to a lender beforehand, because you could, in a state like Texas, get married and your new spouse messes things up, even if they're not trying to go on the loan.
Keep
And I would
talking to the
add,
loan officer.
yeah, it's a very, getting a loan is like a very invasive process. And just know that even if you're getting $100,000 loan or $1 million loan, the process is awkward and uncomfortable. And you're sharing a lot of personal information. And it's like W-2, social security numbers, like all this stuff that you're just like, why do you need to know what my bank account is every single week, Brent? Like it's too much. So just know, set up a little folder on your desktop that has all of that information in it, and that he's going to ask you for it again, and then his partner's going to ask you for it, and it's going to feel awkward, but no, it's normal, and they're just trying to make sure you're qualified.
Right, and get everything to them quickly so that your loan
Yeah.
process keeps moving forward. Very good. All right, now we're moving to part 3, which is the finish line. Let's assume everything goes well, and we're moving toward closing and beyond. So final steps and Bearcat advice. Number 1, Brent, what is the most common reason a closing gets delayed at the last minute, and how can buyers avoid it?
If you're working with the right lender, your loan really shouldn't be the reason that things are delayed. But the only thing that is really out of the control of your real estate agent or your lender are the third party items, which is most specifically the appraisal. So let's say you are getting an FHA backed loan, the appraiser finds it has chipping paint. There can be things like that that need to be remedied and have the appraiser return back to the property, which could delay closing. But in my experience, I think I've only had less than 5 deals that I had an appraisal done and we couldn't come to an agreement based upon what was required. Things like chipping paint, sure, I'll go buy the paint and primer and this weekend paint it. I mean, if both parties, if you want to sell and you want to buy, we're going to find a way to keep everything together. But I would say the home itself probably would be the reason, or if you are doing a new build, the builder delaying the completion of the home. So the property itself would be the short answer. But as long as you're working with the right real estate partner and lender partner and doing your due diligence ahead of time, the process really doesn't have to be confusing or hard. It'll go smooth.
Should go smoothly, right? Yes. Any other thoughts on that? All right.
Same.
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh no, I just agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now this question is for the whole group. You can comment on this. While programs vary by state, what are the best resources for alumni to find local grants or down payment assistance programs in their specific area? So let's hear from each one of you. Julie, any comments on that one?
Website, yeah, is a great resource. JulieRoseHomes.com is a great website. Also, our loan partners are constantly sharing opportunities where we can help buyers find money and grant programs. So just getting in touch and starting this whole process early, I think, is the best thing you can do.
Right, because there are grants and programs out there that can help you. How about you, Jacob? Any thoughts on that?
I would say, just to piggyback, kind of just communicate with your lender early and often. And, sometimes you can go through like an employer or something like that, depending on what field you're in. There might be different opportunities for you. And it's a little more rare, but some employers might also have specific relationships, with partners or something like that they can give you access to, if they work with a lender or work with, a real estate agent or team or something like that specifically. So all those are kind of good things that I would look into. Is just it's kind of sometimes dependent on your field too. So like I know nurses and stuff, like people in the healthcare industry have access to some things that you might not have access to elsewhere, stuff like that.
Brent, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of state-specific ones. There are national ones that exist too. It's your lender probably will have the most expertise in there. Like some loan officers only do Ohio. Well, there's really two most common. OFA and Communities First are the two most common here. But then there are specific cities. So like Hamilton City has a different like specific grant program. And each of these programs can have unique qualifications for credit scores, maximum income requirements. So there's a lot that goes into each of those. So the lender, I guess, is my thought. That's something I'm doing. When I'm pre-approving you and I'm talking to you, I will tell everyone the difference between 10,000 down and zero is about $65 a month on a 30-year loan. So some people think 10,000 is going to save me hundreds. It may not. So I'm personally going to look into the lowest amount of down payment for you possible and see what that looks like. And sometimes your interest rate could be lower if you use your own money. And sometimes your interest rate is lower if you put down a bigger percentage. And how much lower and how much different is it? So those are things that we'll talk about when we're pre-approving someone to say, hey, you can get a grant. The grant interest rate is this. And if you put down your own money, it's this. So some people might have the money for a down payment, but they'll use a grant. There's a lot that goes into it. Some of these grants have a lien against the house, where if you try to refinance or sell within a certain time period, you may have to repay back part of the grant. So it's something else you want to consider when you're deciding what option to take and pursue. So I could talk for hours about grants and options and programs. Yeah.
There's a lot to think about in regard to how to finance the house. Absolutely.
For sure.
All right, thank you. Our closing question. Now, if you could give our UC alumni one piece of advice to take away from today that applies no matter where they live, what would it be? Let's go through the group. Julie?
I think that the biggest takeaway I would like you guys to have is just to feel comfortable asking questions and getting educated. You don't have to be perfect to buy a home. You don't have to have 20% down to buy a home. You don't have to have perfect credit. It's okay. I shared this article with Maurice this morning, and I just shared it again in the chat, but Right now, if you're in between the ages of 20 and 32, if you were to buy a house today, even if it's not your most perfect house that you're going to live in until the day you retire, the additional net worth by age 50 is 22.5%, which is $119,000 based off of $530,000 net worth. So your growth time between now and 50 years old versus waiting until the best interest rate and you have the best credit and before you have the perfect down payment, you every single couple years that you wait, you're lessening that amount of growth and appreciation that you have in your property. So just know you don't have to be perfect to buy a house. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the time, and know that in the long term, like real estate is the most appreciated asset that you're going to have.
Very good. Thank you. Jacob, any thoughts on that? The one
Yeah,
piece
I
of
would
advice to take away.
Yeah, I would say start asking those questions and start communicating with professionals more often and earlier than you would think necessary, because a lot of times I see people put themselves in a bit of a rush and they want to do things by a certain date, and it's like it would have been a lot better if we started the process, usually about 6 months earlier or something like that, because it would give you time to learn more about the specific market and learn more about what exactly it is you want in a house, and from the financing to features and all that kind of stuff. And then the earlier you start, the more you can kind of weigh different scenarios and have a plan and maybe a backup plan and some different strategies to approach purchasing a house.
Brent, one piece of advice?
Buying a house is an investment. We're all salespeople, and of course, I want people to buy homes. That's how I make my living. But I have people that make 60 grand a year. They bought a house 5 years ago. They've sold that house and got proceeds of more money than they make an entire year gross. So in 5 years, they busted their butt, and they'd take 2 years to net $60,000. They bought a house, and in 5 years, they got a $60,000 check. So that's why I like doing what I do, to see that. Like, we talk about creating wealth, but it's like there are so many ways you could invest your money, but buying a house isn't necessarily cheap because you could rent. And when something breaks in your house, you call your landlord. So you're going to take on a little bit of headache when you buy a house, but you just have to remember that it is an investment. And think about like our parents. My parents bought a house and they got a 14% interest rate, and they paid 20 grand for it, and they sold it for 100. So it is crazy. It is crazy how much homes cost now. It is, but it is an investment that even if you look back at 2007 and 2008, when like, oh my gosh, there was a drop. There was a drop for a year and a half. And if you didn't sell your house and you kept it after about 3 years, it was back going up. So and the lending side that caused that issue isn't allowed now. We are much more strict, and it can be a little bit cumbersome to get a home loan. But the general advice would be, I've seen it. We've seen it in just my last 15 years that it is crazy, and you just need to remember it's an investment. So it's an investment that's going to pay dividends for you. It has to.
Very good. Thank you. That is true. It's an investment, and your first house might not be perfect. It might not be the ultimate house you want, but again, look at it as an investment that will probably grow, and you're moving forward. All right. That's the end of our questions, but now we're going to go back to Maurice, and we're going to open it up to questions and answers. Maurice will facilitate the questions from the chat and direct them to the panelists whose expertise best matches the inquiry. Maurice?
All right. Thank you, Anne. So, first question I have is about, um, you know, here's the question. Buyers often ask agents to point them towards safe neighborhoods or good schools. How do you answer these questions while complying with the laws and ensure you do not steer buyers? That's for anyone.
Great question. I can take it if you guys would like. But
Yeah,
fair
for sure.
housing is a big piece of this, and we really have to be very, very sensitive to that. We kind of talked about it a little bit early on, but it's important for our buyers to do their own research. I oftentimes will direct them to spotcrime.com so that they can check out the community and they can gauge what their level of safety is that they feel most comfortable. Also, we have a lot of social media, so people can hop online and they can find community pages quite easily, and they can kind of make that determination on their own. But it's super important that you guys understand as buyers that my level of safety might be very different from your level of safety. So I'm going to always give you the tools to research that information on your own, but I am not authorized ever to tell you where the best place to live is.
I think that's a
would
very
agree.
good point. Yes.
I was just going to
I
say I
think
would
people
agree
need
that.
to do people
Go ahead,
need to do
sorry.
their own research, I think, in regard to where they want to live, and we certainly don't want to steer or guide them in any way at all.
That's why
Go
I kind
ahead.
of my piece of advice was to just start the process earlier so you have time to do that kind of research. So you have, we don't want to tell you where you want to live. We're there to help you kind of find the right property in the right place. So do that research on your own beforehand. And if you have more time and you might have an idea of where you're looking to purchase and what that area kind of offers for you specifically, because obviously we sell houses all over the place from Dayton to Cincinnati, all around the city. So one area might work for somebody else and you might not necessarily agree with what they find valuable about that area. So
On our Sibsy Klein website, we have an area, a portion called community, and it's very interesting. You can go on there and you can get all kinds of information positively and descriptively about each neighborhood around the tri-state.
Awesome. So, second question. And Brent, I believe you may have touched on this a little bit, but I often would go to when I was in the home buying process, I would go to the bank and seek I got a pre-qualification versus this full pre-approval. So the question is, what is the true difference between a pre-qualification and a full pre-approval, and how does each impact our offer strength in the market?
So depending on who you talk to, some banks will call a pre-qualification a pre-approval. So at the end of the day, in general, a pre-qual is more basic. A pre-approval means you've been pre-reviewed and it's been approved. But the short answer is you want to get everything turned in. And like what I'm talking about, I do a TBD approval where we talk, you say you want X payment, I send you all the way through underwriting, and I have the underwriter underwrite your loan on the program that we're going to use and tell me if there's anything else that we need to provide between now and closing. So you just want to do your due diligence. But at the end of the day, example, let's say we work together and I pre-approved you. If I call the listing agent and explain to them that Maurice already turned into me the last 3 years of his W-2s, his last 4 pay stubs, his last 3 bank statements. We've looked and made sure there's no large deposits. There's no deductions on his pay stubs. There's nothing that's going to be needed throughout the process. We need an appraisal and title work. His loan will be easy. His assets are signed off on. I would think that a listing agent is going to think very highly of that offer if they go back to their seller and explain that Maurice had all these things done previously. So I would want to have a thorough pre-approval. But bank to bank, I don't want to talk ill of any banks, but there are some banks that will say you're pre-approved and maybe don't look at it as well. And there's some realtors that if the offer came from an internet bank, they're like, I don't know if I like that offer because I've had bad experiences with that bank before. So
yeah,
it can matter who you talk to. But a pre-approval is supposed to be a more thorough review versus a pre-qualification. You want to have your credit checked. You want to turn in documents. If you're not turning in documents, there are so many things that could come up on those that could cause issue.
Awesome. And Jake, were you getting ready to add something or?
no, sorry.
Okay, Gotcha. So another question that came through the chat. If both married partners are first-time homebuyers, is it possible to qualify for first-time homebuyer assistance for two different properties?
So some of the down payment assistance programs are required to be your primary residence. So you can't have two primary residences. But that would kind of be the biggest line that you have to toe with that question. I'm not exactly sure what they're asking, but I mean, you can actually own a house, sell it, and some of these programs will say that if you haven't owned a house within the last 3 years, you're a first-time home buyer again. That's the criteria that it takes. So I would never like wait to buy a house because you're gonna burn your first-time home buyer status. It doesn't necessarily work like that.
Gotcha. All right. So another question: if a home requires major repairs, if a home requiring major repairs discovered during the inspection, what is the best way to negotiate seller credits? What's the best way to negotiate seller credits versus a price reduction?
I would
I,
say, oh yeah, go on. You
Go
can go,
ahead.
Jacob.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's really more of the buyer preference. You know, if the seller has an agent that's good at explaining things, they would explain that the proceeds for them are going to be the same, whether it's a credit versus whether it's a price reduction. But on the buy side of things, sometimes those credits can be more impactful because I think Brent spoke to it a little bit earlier, but when you take an amount and stretch it over 30 years, it might not have as big of an impact as if you got something like a credit at closing to handle some of those costs up front.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's nice oftentimes to take the lower purchase price because then your overall principal is lower. And then I also am a believer in managing the process with the contractors myself, like my buyers managing it, because then they can hire out um who they want to do the work, and then they can manage the process if they wanted to like upgrade something. But it really does depend on the specific scenario because some sellers just plain can't do the work because they're elderly and they just need to get out of the property. And then some buyers are really handy and they want to do the work themselves, so they want to get in there and get down to business. So I think it's very scenario driven, but know that you as the buyer have options. And working with your inspector and your loan partner, we can say, hey, if we got shaved off $10,000 off this purchase price, oh my gosh, look at what this would do to your loan over 30 years. Or, hey, you could use your dad's uncle's brother's friend to do this work for free after closing. So we can make all those things work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. And Brent, this is targeted towards you, but anyone, feel free to jump in there. We've seen, in the past 10 years, we've seen places like Redfin be charged with redlining, right? And, redlining is thought of to be this, civil rights era term, but to recognize that this stuff still happens today, you know. You do a browse of the news, you can kind of see some of the stuff happens across our country. So, Brent, just a question. What guardrails does your institution have in place to prevent illegal practices like redlining or predatory targeting? So, redlining, really, the definition there is refusing to lend in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah, the reason I chose the bank that I did, I originally worked somewhere else and I wanted to start my own thing and I wanted to be able to help as many people as possible. So the company I chose to work at we actually operate in a few different channels. So there are actually some independent mortgage brokers that will send loans that have lower credit scores into my company because some of their companies, like other places, will not do the loan. So I want to find a way to help everyone to buy a house. But yeah, it can be a hard line to toe for some banks because it's like you're credit worthy and you're not. The way that my company handles it is there's no overlays on our lending. So there are these two automated computer underwriting models that spit out an approval or not. If the computer spits out an approval, my company will give you a loan. So that's the same way that some of these lower 500 credit scores, I've done the loans because we're not going to overturn that. When the computer says yes, it means that the government will essentially back that loan. So if we have government backing, we will do the loan. We won't ever say, well, you're on the west side of town. That's what some banks had done because they thought the west side of town was riskier and foreclosures were higher. So we're not going to do the loan there. So I'd like to think that doesn't happen as much across the nation, but I think more of the redlining that we see in the market today is more related to advertising, where there's specific advertising only geared towards certain areas. We're only going to advertise in this one spot, and we're not advertising to other people. It's targeted advertising. It's probably more of the issue. But my short answer would be trying to go through and help out everyone and not having overlays on what's allowed and who we'd like to.
Thank you, Brent. I greatly appreciate that. And so then another question will be about language and accessibility. How do you accommodate first-time buyers who face language barriers or require reasonable accommodations for disabilities during the home buying process?
We have certain people who are specific in various languages, so if we let administration know that we have someone who requires Spanish or requires a different language, we can search through our people and see who does have that language capability.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, we have it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Same thing here. I would usually, if that's something that I think would get in the way of the process or make it a lot more difficult, I would refer them to someone that I know in my office that could help them better than I could, and kind of just guide them in that direction and have them connect with that person.
Absolutely.
I got these really cool Meta glasses, and they have this translation capability. Stop laughing at me now. So I've not actually used it. I don't necessarily know if I'd be the perfect person, but I'm with Jacob and Brent and as well. Like I would refer them to someone because ideally we want everybody to make their way to home ownership, I think is the most important thing. And we have a lot of lender partners as well as inspectors and other realtors who are capable of speaking all different languages and disability from a disability standpoint. I know I've picked up clients and taken them, to house viewings and things like that because they, had all sorts of different things going on in their lives. So I think we're all pretty flexible. We're all 1099 employees, 100% commission based, you know what I mean? So we're going to do what we need to help you guys make your way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brent.
I was just going to say it's about providing a good experience. So if that experience is better suited to somebody else that's not me, then I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we connect you with the right person. So
yeah,
and even not related to like different languages. There are different loan programs for people that are like non-permanent residents, resident aliens, foreign nationals. So there's a lot of loan programs that exist for people in those scenarios as well. So working with a lender that knows how that stuff works is big. Where sometimes some of these bigger banks, it's a reason I didn't choose to work there. They don't have options for people that are I-10. There's a lot of people that come to UC that are from other countries. So that can definitely be something that's big.
Yeah. No, thank you, Brent. Thank you, Julie. Thank you all. And I just want to note that, failure, if a realty company fails to help someone due to a disability or language, that is a violation of the Fair Housing Act. So, that brings to the next question. I got another question in chat, but if a buyer suspects they are experiencing discrimination from a seller or another professional during the transaction, what steps should they take to document it and protect their rights?
I would say just keep track of written communications and speak openly with your realtor. I mean, it depends on who's doing it, obviously, but if it's your direct representative, there are brokers that you can contact outside of, your real estate. Not everything has to go directly to your agent. So sometimes getting a contact for a broker, if you feel like your agent is doing something that they shouldn't be doing. But other than that, I would communicate with your real estate agent, and then they can take the appropriate steps to speak with their broker. And then the two different, what if the seller side and the buyer side have to have a conversation? Sometimes it takes, one broker reaching out to another and, just I assume that there would be an investigation. I've never really dealt with that specifically, but yeah, that's kind of what I would think is just keep records and keep, document any kind of formal written communication, stuff like that. So
We
Yeah.
also have an anonymous outreach that buyers can utilize through like our Ohio area realtors, which is like our association that we roll up to as realtors. And you would be able to also report any concern anonymously. And then the Ohio Board of Realtors would reach out to us and our brokers, as Jake alluded to properly, work into that investigation. I too, thankfully, haven't had any issues with it, but it is
That's a good
definitely
thing.
something we
That's
have to
good.
be sensitive. Yeah, we have to be sensitive about it. But I think all of us as realtors do the best we can from like a pattern of practice. So like it's a very structured process. And when I go through my buyer's consultation, it is very clear the process and the communications that I do, although unique to your individual needs as a buyer, the process itself is clearly understood by me, maybe not you as a buyer, but I know the steps. And so I hope, kind of throughout everybody's feeling really comfortable and that, there's no discrimination or any mistreatment of any of our clients.
yeah, I would say too, just to tack on, like, if you feel like your agent is not advocating for you, definitely advocate for yourself. And if you aren't comfortable, just stop. There are a lot of things in place that can get you out of situations that you might not feel comfortable with. So there's no, unless you're under contract and pass all these contingencies, there's usually something that can get you out of a contract. Or if you're uncomfortable with something, I would speak up about it. Don't keep that to yourself, because sometimes if you keep it to yourself for too long, it could be too late, too little, too late type of situation. So
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Jacob. Two final questions in the chat here. One, how do you compare the benefits of home appreciation and equity growth against the opportunity to save cash and invest while living at home?
You can use a financial calculator. You're going to have to assume your approximate gains from what you're investing. But even if you compare the math, it's something I'll show someone when I'm pre-approving you, the cost of waiting. And the cost of waiting, and listen, some people should rent. If you don't know how long you're going to stay in the city, you should rent. If you're on a job for a year and you don't think you're going to stay in that city, rent. Like, don't buy, right? You could buy. I have people that will buy in that area because they can say it's my primary residence, and then a year from now I'm going to make a rental property and get rental income from it. But you could compare and say, hey, if I invest $200 in the market versus this in a house, and we could do the math and figure out what the difference would be. I just do mention to people, there's some statistic like what percentage of millionaires made money in real estate, and it's something astronomical. Where like, go ask anyone that you know that's owned a house. Did they have any money? Or is it people that maybe are more on the renting side of things that tend not to have as much money saved up? Just there's a lot more big opportunity to make money in real estate than investing, and picking the right vehicle to invest in. Think about how many people invested in stuff, and including me earlier this year before. My 401k was down 15%.
Mm-hmm.
My house never goes down until I sell it, until that day that I sell and I get X check. The ebbs and flows I don't necessarily feel when looking at it. But yeah, it's definite thing to consider. And how long, what's the cost to sell? There's real estate commissions when you sell a house. But when you look at the appreciation gain in principal amortization, where you're paying a loan down, it's crazy how much money you can make. Even like I gave as an example, people that have owned a house for 5 years and are getting $60,000 plus checks. That's their net check to them.
Right. I had a guy one time who was relocating here to Cincinnati. Maurice, is it okay if I digress
Yeah, please.
for a moment longer?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So I had a guy who was moving here. He was getting relocated for a job. So I did my FaceTime showing of the property. He was like, sold. I love it. Wrote the contract, accepted. So never met the gentleman. Then his relocation got canceled, which was such a bummer. But, of course, he was like, okay, Julie, we've got to put this thing back up on the market. Well, in our inspection period, there was like, say, 5 things we had asked this investor, because he was a flipper, to fix in the property. Well, they fixed it. We resold his house for $100,000 more than he bought it for. Now, is this every story? No. Normally, I tell people that they really should plan to be in houses like 5 to 7 years so that you can see that long-term gain. So this, in the matter of 45 days, it was exceptional. But the fact was, is the man had never even walked into the property. He had never even seen it in real life, like nothing. And he made that much money on the house in that 45-day time frame. So that was some luck and some karma, but it is one of those things that does happen, and we are seeing it.
I think you're
Absolutely.
muted.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
So, and then the final question that has someone asked in the chat is, what's the best way to save for a deposit on the house? Any quick answers?
What's the best way to save money?
Yeah.
Don't spend it. I mean, there are some people that set up like a direct deposit or just have $100 a check go into a separate savings account that you forget about or something like that. That's simple. It's forced. And then before you know it, funds are going to grow. But what I would always say is, how much are you going to save? How much do you need? If you don't know the answers to those questions, it's like you're going on a trip somewhere and you don't know where. You're just going to like wing it and figure it out. You can do a soft credit pull, not hurt your credit, see what your credit looks like, and get on the path to be ready. I would say that probably out of 100 applications, maybe 65 of them are pre-approved within a day of them applying. There's probably over 30% of the people that apply for a loan with me that aren't ready now. They're not. Whether their credit's not good enough, they don't have money saved, they make too much money for down payment assistance. Those 30 some people, it's not that you're not approved. It's just not now. What do you do? What's the plan? People will say, I'm going to work on my credit. How? What are you going to do? The soft credit pull, we can run simulators to see what our next steps specifically for you and your situation should be. And as far as saving money goes, what's the target? If you said, I want to buy this many houses, this much square footage, let's make a goal for what we need, and we can set up better parameters. But I think sometimes it's easy to see money go out one way. So I've had people, I'm like, just do that. Direct deposit, your $100 a week, whatever it is you're going to save, stick in a different account, forget about it.
There you go.
I know we haven't talked much about gift funds, but I would also consider you young buyers who are thinking about this, to also really have some conversations with your parents, because your parents are sitting on likely a lot of equity. And there are some ways working with your loan partner that we can like leverage your parents and maybe not use them fully as a bank, but they could potentially help you with a down payment. And I think it's a really, really great investment for your families to really consider helping you do something like that.
Awesome.
And grandparents as well. I've seen a number of grandparents provide gifts to help with down payments and closing costs and so forth. And, I think there's a limit to that, but still it can be an asset coming in.
Yeah. If it's the purchase of your primary residence, there are very few loans that restrict gifts. All of the money that you use could all be gifted. And sometimes you may have a 401k that the company matches. If it's the purchase of your primary residence, you can almost always do a pull from your 401k. Again, you have to think about it as an investment. Most likely your 401k is going to make you repay back the money to yourself in that account. But your 401k money is just sitting there. You're just diverting it from sitting in this account and renting over here to a different investment vehicle, into a place that you're going to live at. So sometimes people don't even realize, I'll look at their pay stubs and see they have a 401k. I'm like, have you ever considered using any of this money? If so, here's how it would impact your approval.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ann, and a huge thank you to Jacob, Brent, and Julie for sharing your time, incredible insights, and expertise with us today. Navigating the home buying process can certainly feel like a major undertaking, but having a trusted network of fellow Bearcats in your corner makes all the difference. I also want to thank everyone who tuned in today. We hope you found this discussion valuable as you think about your next steps toward homeownership. As a quick reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email that includes a full recording of today's webinar, along with the key resources and contact information shared by our panelists. Before we log off, I want to encourage you to keep the momentum going. This webinar is just one of many programs we host throughout the year designed to support you professionally, personally, and socially. Please make sure you visit our alumni events calendar. See the link right there on the screen, alumni.uc.edu/events, to see what else we have coming up, whether you're living right here in Cincinnati or connecting with one of our national networks across the country. There are always great opportunities to get involved, expand your network, and stay connected to the university. Thank you all again for being here. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and as always, go Bearcats.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.